Hi. I want you to picture being an intern in New York City. Your first months in the city trying to make it in this world, and your new boss walks by and you say, "Oh, hi, I'm Leisha, nice to meet you." And he just walks by and doesn't stop or look at you and just says, "We don't shake," and keeps going. Okay. Welcome to New York, Leisha. This was my first experience with a Hasidic Jewish man. Being a girl from the south of America, not the South of America, but being from a Southern gal, you don't even see anybody wearing yarmulkes around. You hear about them in movies or whatnot. So we don't really know much about their culture, and I didn't even know they existed, honestly, to this sect. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background today in case you ever visit the city or even move to the city. It's good to know a little bit about their culture so you can spot them and know who they are and how to interact with them. Know what some of those calendar holidays are that you never know quite what they are. So I really find it to be a fascinating and mysterious culture. And I learned a lot about it through working for George and Jacob over those first 2 years in New York. George was an Orthodox Jewish man, and Jacob is a Hasidic man. Um, there's a difference there that I'm not going to go into, but I learned more from George than Jacob because of the nature of the Hasidic culture between men and women that are not your family. So I had more interaction with George, and he would educate me, what we called my Jewification. So George is a funny guy. Hopefully it'll help you avoid some blunders if you ever go up. Um, a good way to be able to spot him is the men going to be walking briskly, dressed in black, black slacks, black jacket, very normal, white button-up shirt, black hat. All very same. You wouldn't probably notice them except for the payas. And the payas are the curls that come down from their sideburns because they're not supposed to cut the hair over their ears. So there's these curls, like they'll have short hair, curls, hat, beard. So the men are a lot easier to spot than the women. The women, they're modestly dressed. They make it stylish, but they're supposed to be from wrist to collarbone to ankles covered, as well as their hair is to be covered. It's part of modesty as well. Only her husband is to see her hair. So it's either covered with a scarf, or a wig and a scarf. The wigs are rather expensive and usually made by the same companies. So once you spot one, then you can kind of start to see them. They'll jump out to you more once you really kind of get an idea of what they look like. But otherwise, the women, if they are actually outside of the community, they're not going to be they're a little more inconspicuous than the men are. It's a part of their world is being separate. The Hebrew word for separate and for holy has the same root. So a lot of their world is about setting themselves apart from the secular world with language, location, eating habits, social and worship standards. It's a deep-rooted history that began in 19th century Eastern Europe. It was more of a spiritual revolution. It was a spiritual revival. Now they're considered really ultra orthodox and conservative, but in the beginning they were considered mystics in Eastern and Central Europe. The message was of an emotional and spiritual expression of joy. So it really called to people and caught on pretty quickly with their ecstatic prayer, song, and dance. It was very popular and was spreading. However, the Holocaust happened, and much of their population was eradicated, unfortunately. So many escaped to different countries and different places, and a lot of them landed in New York, mainly Brooklyn. So if you go to this day to Williamsburg, Crown Heights, or Borough Park, they have whole sections with like a wire across the top to mark their territory. It's pretty subtle unless you know how to look for it. But it's one of their boundaries that they have, and they stick close to their neighborhood. It's a collective society that's living within an individualistic society. It's grown rapidly within the past 2 decades. The majority of Hasidic Jews live in Brooklyn, from all over the world. It's hard to really say how many because they're not really big on letting people know how many they got. But since they don't use birth control, then they multiply. They all have between 5 and 7 children usually. So they generations grow quickly. They have their own schools, synagogues, ambulance, public transportation. Most of what they need is within walking distance from their synagogue to the stores and whatnot. This helps when observing Shabbos, which is their day of rest. So from Friday at sundown until Sunday morning at sunrise, they are to fast and not create anything, even electricity. So they can't even open the fridge, because if you open the fridge, it turns on the little fridge light, and that creates electricity. So it's a time for family and for rest. Making babies actually isn't considered creation because the baby doesn't get created for a few days. So they're eating, drinking, and making babies. So just rest and worship on Shabbos. The language is also something that sets them apart. English is actually their second language, even though they're American born. So most of them only speak Yiddish until they come of age, and then they learn English afterwards. So you will find men that were born in America with a foreign sounding accent, but it's not foreign because it is from here. Just Yiddish is their main. Hebrew they use just for like reading the Bible. Their daily in the house speak is a combination of the three. Food is also a way they set themselves apart. You've heard keep it kosher. Well, keeping kosher is very important to them. One day, as an intern, hey George, I'm going to get coffee. Would you like some? No, it's okay. Pats his belly. I had a burger for lunch. And I said, okay, cool. Had to ask somebody, what does that mean? So one of the 3 ways you keep things kosher is, 1, to avoid non-kosher animals, fish that have no scales or fins, land animals that do not chew their cud and have cleft hooves, and most birds. 2, only meat is slaughtered in a certain way and it's drained of the blood. They got a thing about blood. And then avoiding mixing meat and dairy. So since he had meat at lunch, he skipped his coffee because he can't have his coffee without milk. Personal preference, enough to the point that he won't drink black coffee. So, yet again, welcome to New York, Leisha. He even bought me a sandwich once from a kosher deli. It's like pastrami on rye with like a dipping au jus thing. It was amazing. And he said, see, you think we suffer. It's actually quite good. So socially, they're much different, partially because of the relationship between men and women, as I mentioned before, in the family structure as well. It's a patriarchal society. Dictates men are not allowed to come into physical contact with women that are not their wife, daughter, or immediate family. Worked for Jacob for 2 years, and we came into physical contact twice. Once was skin to skin, completely by accident. He probably had to go to the synagogue and had to go to mikveh and go and get cleansed because he doesn't know if I'm on my cycle or not. So I'm unclean. Again, blood is a thing. So even when his wife is on her cycle, there's a whole week or more that they don't sleep in the same bed. And she goes until she goes and gets cleansed herself. And I'm talking like squeaky clean. Someone scrubs them from head to toe because they're unclean while they're on their cycles. So also an intimate thing to them is eye contact. The eyes are the window to the soul. So in order to make eye contact with someone is actually quite a very intimate thing. So even when speaking to me, they're not rude about it, but they look just kind of down and around. So I had much fewer conversations with Jake than I did George. They were much shorter. Both of them were patriarchs of their family. I overheard George once trying to make a match. Apparently one of his granddaughters had come of age, so she's about 19 or 20. They start matchmaking. He said, I don't know if her personality would work with him, but Jacob they're good. So they help in the matchmaking process. His one and only son worked with us. He was the youngest of 5 daughters and the only boy, so you want to say Prince. He was special. Rather spoiled, Mayor was. Love him. like a little brother. He's spoiled. Jacob's son Hershey came to work with us soon after he was married and came of age. And that had to be quite a culture shock for him to be in such a secular world all of a sudden, surrounded by 4 secular, outspoken women who are used to working in a man's world and tattooed and loud, and God knows what we talked about in front of him. We'd forget he was over there. So, culture shock for him, bless his heart, at 20 years old. Very sweet men. But much of their culture separates men from women. So, in school and worship socially, even at weddings. I had the honor to attend my friend Henya's wedding. I was one of 3 secular women invited. Dressing for a wedding at last minute in evening wear is a little challenging, especially being a New Yorker and on a budget while you're in school. So good thing that New Yorkers wear all black, and I was able to layer a few things, and it was winter, so that helped too. So layers, black, worked out. I basically wore 3 dresses. But yeah, it was a really joyous event. The room was separated by a mechnica. I think I pronounced that correctly. There's a divider between the room. You could peek around the sides and see. It wasn't, a huge wall or anything, but the women dance and eat on one side and men on the other. But there's lots of dancing and drinking. The drinks were on the men's side of the room. There wasn't any wine on our side of the room, but somebody was smuggling us some drinks out. So, but it was really neat. And my favorite part was the dancing. And the dancing is again a collective and not an individualistic thing. So the bride is in the center with one of her friends, and then a circle of women holding hands dance around her in one way. Then the next circle of women go in the opposite direction. The next circle of women goes the opposite direction. And so it's just this huge circle of just like laughing and dancing, and it's just like nobody's worried about their dance moves. Nobody's worried about what they look like because they're in it together, and there's not really anybody left to watch because everybody's dancing. We got to dance with her in the center, so that was cool. So, we'll always have that I danced with her at her wedding. She was actually going to be someone I interviewed for this talk today, but she just came back to New York, and hasn't seen her giant family in a very long time, and it was Passover. So she was a little busy, but we'll be able to catch up one day soon, but holidays are very important to them. So, back to the holidays on the calendar, you may have seen all these strange things of Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hanukkah, the most well-known, though really more of a kid's thing. It's kind of their least important holiday. Passover's a big deal, same time as our Easter. So their holidays, it's a time for food and drink and family and worship. They all have different goals. Some, everything shuts down. They come together for celebration, for time with family. Some are spent in a hut or tent in the backyard. Some, they are to clean their entire house, top to bottom, fridge, everything inside and out. Some are for fasting, and some are for fried foods in celebration of oil. So rich, very rich history and all of that. I encourage you to check out more of that. So I find myself envious of their culture. Raised American and Southern, and in a family that we might have 2 generations deep of history. My grandfather, my grandfather's grandfather. That's all I really know about, So, our history doesn't go very deep. There wasn't a whole lot of family around because we didn't live nearby. And, some see the Hasidic culture as sexist and bizarre and cult-like. But, I choose to see it a different way. I choose to see it that I think they have a lot right where we have a lot wrong as an individualistic society. The way they come together and stick together has a community aspect that I think that our society could never actually reach or understand. It's very rare that anyone has that level of community. So I really admire them and choose to admire and respect them instead of judge them. I hope this helped you today. Thank you.